Have you noticed every single taxman in almost all countries across the world are genuinely hated? But notice we have no real issue with our taxmen. And the strange thing itself about the taxmen in Singapore is that actually they genuinely remain invisible. In fact, the tax process has become so efficient that we don't even notice it, right? It's not a strong burden upon us over here. And basically the tax, right, is actually working really pretty well. What's interesting about this over here, however, is that if we talk about tax, right, we have to understand the relationship between tax, life, death, and family. So the first emotional frame that we're going to discuss, right, is the emotion of what respect is, right? What respect is. Because only when we understand respect can we understand disrespect. If you take a Serena Williams, right, and I'll watch her play, and there's a deep admiration, right, for what she does, okay? But I want you to listen to the language. If there's a deep admiration for what she does, I would say, okay, if I ever play tennis, right, I want to be that kind of tennis player. If I play tennis, but I don't. That's why I only admire. What she does, in the excellence of what she does, has nothing to do with my life. Teachers, nurses, cleaners, right? These are people that I share a common space with. These are people where I know that if you do what you do and you do it well, it actually eventually impacts my life. So when I meet, right, an excellent teacher, it's very different from meeting an excellent tennis star, right? In the idea itself, right, the respect is something which we're saying that your skill or your talent or your contribution to the world, right, is actually constituted of me. That I would be a lesser person because, right, you don't do what you do. And a lot of respect over here sits around that particular idea, right? So you'll find, right, that there are several professions in Singapore, right, that actually we accord very high levels of respect, mothers included. Respect is an emotion first, right? We have to experience the emotion first. And if you keep practicing it, generally, right, it becomes a value. Respect can grow, right? But it requires us to find common ground. I don't know how many of you recall situations, right, in your own life where you have met somebody, and either in your mind or you verbally have said it, and you have said something like, I really have lost all respect for you. Right? I have lost respect for you. I no longer want to have anything to do with you. Right? And when we use language like that, essentially what we're saying is that, and typically it happens, a lot of times it happens in breakups, right? Or it happens in adultery. It happens when someone doesn't respect the space that you have. Disrespect is also sometimes a defense mechanism. Disrespect starts off with protection. Contempt is the same emotion, but this time a lot more active and aggressive. Right? It's actually saying over here that I will punish you, right, because we're not in this common space. I will punish you with this. So I will look at you with pride and contempt. It doesn't help that Singapore evolves as quickly as it does. Generation to generation, right, the speed at which we begin to progress and evolve has one generation, another generation live in completely different worlds. Completely different worlds, right? And if we do so, it's very hard for me to look at my parents and say, I share the common space with you, right? And it's therefore also difficult for me to respect what is it you do. So, Amos E, right? That's the adjective that people use to describe him. Disrespectful, right? Don't you recognize that we have common space? If you really listen to him, right, he says, no, we don't. You think I'm Singaporean? I'm a global citizen. And when he speaks over here, the level of intelligence this young man has, right, allows him to take that intelligence and says, but actually, space is but a construct or a narrative. And we can look at that particular space over there and really find it the way we want. Right? So all these little lines you're drawing on, you're being a bit pathetic, right? It's very much similar itself, right, to deeply conservative traditional people who look at marriage as monogamy. Right? Marriage must be monogamous. This is our common space, right? No other person should come into this particular relationship. Or some man in the marriage says, open your mind. This little confined, don't be parochial. We can share. We can do, open your mind. And when he does this and he opens his mind and he moves out of this space, right? The other person experiences it as a disrespect to our space. How dare you? Right? But you see, if we're now living in a society which is as porous as Singapore is, and we are dealing with it, we're dealing with a very, very porous society. progressive society, right, then the notion of common space, right, will consistently shift. That there's a need for us to create common space for young people. If they largely itself exist online, and they're moving online over here, then online there is no limit itself to space. There are no defined or definitions around basically how do we behave here or how do we behave there, right? And the culture or the traditions or whatever the case over there, they actually can be amorphous, right? Boundless that particular ways. Because all behavior itself is really contextual, right? I get it why we ban actually medicine. Because largely what it is that it's the site that's coming in and just saying that we can disrespect the space, but I'll keep it a secret for you. Yeah. So we now have an understanding of actually what respect, right, is and what possibly disrespect and contempt is. Okay. So the question over here is, what if our next generation, right, of younger people, right, primarily about 80% of you here, grows a disrespect for life, for death, and for family? Our total fertility rate right now is currently rock bottom. If you go online and you just type in, right, what 1.2 means, right, what 1.2 means, it does necessarily means that within basically 20 years, you're looking at a ratio of 1:3, right, in terms of elderly versus young person, right? Right now, our ratio is 1:7.5, okay? CIA puts it at 0.8. I don't know how they calculate, but they put us right now, we are the lowest country in the world on their own ranking for total fertility rate. Right, Hong Kong is the next lowest, right there. But in these bigger numbers over here, it necessarily means that literally at 0.8 total fertility rate, for every $2 you're spending, you're earning 80 cents. That's essentially what it means, right? And sooner or later, you have to borrow, right? So it's called foreign talent. The question we're asking is that, and I say this, hopefully that I'm assuming the audience already more or less understands what disrespect is. Whether that among a younger generation, there's a disrespect for life. That actually, babies have got nothing to do with me. Or children nothing to do with me. Right? My happiness has a lot to do with me. My progress has a lot to do with me. But children have nothing to do with me. By 2030, that means within your generation, you will really see those numbers. The ratios will be 1:3. Right? For every older person above the age of 60, right, you will have 3 young people. Okay? What this means, whether or not tax goes up or whatever the case over there, we have no idea. But Singapore is frantically, right, trying to build hospitals to actually meet this need right now. Right? But at the same time over here, a generally young generation doesn't really get what that means. Your landscape will literally change. Orchard Road will look different. No, I guarantee you. The vibrancy and the pace of life, it will literally slow down. You will feel it. Suddenly you're in Osaka. Large country like Japan, that's one thing. For a country with no natural resources, which is human capital dependent, it is, it's frightening. I did quite a few extensive interviews, right, around this whole idea of what family really is. And I spoke about this with the insurance industry, with the tax people, with MPTD, this National Population Talent Division, right, and the other ministry, well, the family ministry, right. So we all came together itself and just talked about what exactly, right, the family is. And what they said itself is, this is clear for them. From every single society on earth, okay, once the family unit starts becoming dysfunctional, the society will collapse within 15, 20 years. The whole family, the whole society will collapse within 15, 20 years, right? It will literally take one generation if the family unit breaks down. Right? And the key question we asked was why, right? And it was the tax department that gave me basically the clearest answer, right? And they said, it's this. The family, right, as an entity, is a unique entity. No other entity on earth, no other structure, no other institution on earth, right, can do what the family does. Because the family, right, gives disproportionately much. Children are a horrible investment. The family, right, it gives more, right, than any other entity. And doing so over here, right, it gives with no expectation of return. Even charities are not as sustainable as what families really are. And if you think about this over here, if a family breaks down, right, to even just let's just say 20% of society over there, the kind of costs that basically a society has to burden, right, with all these people that are not taken care of, right, it goes through the roof. If you really start taking out, right, what your families do, right, and you monetize this, it is a non-viable entity. It's a financial institution. It is untenable. Families can't be replaced. So let's say a child no longer actually is taken care of by the family. Right? How much would it cost the state to actually take care? Right? And if you were basically to give a child basically to either a state-employed nurse or a mother, right, who would do a better job? Right? And it's strange over here because you can pause for and go, no, I think she can do a decent job. Possibly. Right? I remember I ran this argument right, together with MSF. I said over here, no, I think they can do just as well. Right? Then they said, okay, then multiply that by 1,000. 1,000 state-run nurses versus 1,000 mothers. Who will do a better job? And 1-to-1, there's an argument. 1,000 to 1,000, there just isn't ability to scale. 1,000 mothers from instinct, right, will do a better job than basically 1,000 nurses from training. Right? And they're saying over here, this is largely right, the best case scenario. Now let's put basically the worst case scenario. Frustrated state-employed nurse and a frustrated mother. Who will do a better job? And it's strange, no, because actually if you're a frustrated mother, you will still go because I'll do it anyway. It's like, I hate you, but I'll do it anyway. Right? Because you can't really quit from it. Right, that way. Yeah. No staff turnover on this side. And it's a key point. Right? And one that was made right, across ministries and across agencies. Right? Across civil society even. If the family were basically a business entity, it is completely untenable. And therefore, as an institution, right, that alone is the reason why we have to preserve it. So you think your family is not related to taxes? Your family does jobs well, right? Essentially itself, right? And IRAS was make me sure I'm very careful in expressing this and saying that, yes, there is a correlation between the idea that your tax remains low, right, and your families remain strong. If your families remain strong, I spend less, and therefore I tax less. Right? It's not the only way we make money, right? Because tax itself, our government revenue comes from all sorts of sources over here, right? But when the basic family structure starts to break down, right, all sorts of costs, right, across the board start going up. So this is speaking to one HDB dude, okay? So I met with him and I just said, okay, so when you think about families, right, what are you worried about? He says that you have no idea, right, how stressful it is each time itself we build a 4-room or 5-room flat. Right? So why would you be stressed about that? He says, because each time you build a 4 or 5-room flat, right, I can't suddenly change it to 2 2-room flats. If one family who needs a 4-room flat gets divorced, they will suddenly need 2 3-room flats. Oh. It's like, walao way. It's so obvious, but it's also right, something which is invisible to us. If your family structures don't stay together itself, you will have housing gluts everywhere, you know. You have problems with basically right, finding the right accommodation for different kind of groups. The assumptions of what we've built so far in terms of whatever housing blocks we've had over here is really based upon the fact that families stay the way they are. But if generations don't hold that and family values start to break, right, then yes, you will have different housing requirements, which is why Hong Kong has as many small flats as it does. It's not a question of small land. It's actually a question of dysfunctional families. It's more and more individuals choosing to stay alone. That's why they can settle with 600 square foot, 400 square foot, right? But because, right, we have houses over here, or generally the families are still more or less intact, that's why we have so many 4-rooms and so many 5-rooms. Did you know that in marriages in Singapore, 40% of all marriages are married to a foreigner? So what does this mean, right? What does it mean? It means a few things. The SAF has already begun to somehow experience it, right? So one thing they've experienced over here is that because now, a father or a mother, right, is a foreigner, right, they no longer pass on the same narratives about what is precious as an institution, right? If both basically parents, right, were Singaporean, they may have grown up with the understanding that NS is important, right, important for our sovereignty. When you have basically one Singaporean and another maybe Vietnamese, right, they come together, it's okay. It wasn't basically what we did in our country. Or come back with us to Vietnam and you find all the opportunity right there. So when 40% of marriages of you are married to a foreigner, those narratives are no longer as strong. Right? And you find yourself, right, again, right, it starts to fragment society. One of the main thrusts of Ho Kwon Ping's lecture earlier, right, in terms of family and demography, was that he was saying that one of the things that he was suggesting is that we should go the way of the Scandinavians. That if we really truly want children, if we want more robust families, if we want people to make their choices over here, then state should actually throw more money at the problem, right, and basically have childcare and subsidies and God knows whatever things they have over there. And Prime Minister actually disagreed, right? He said we can do all the things we want, but the bottom line stuff is, are you going to make the choice or not? Actually, this whole total fertility rate issue goes a bit deeper than that. It seems as if over the past 3 decades or so, right, girls in the 1950s, right, have more or less learned to be women today, right? But in that same span of 30 years, right, men have learned to be boys. Women, powerful, effectual, right, clear voice, right, clear contribution, clear gift. But because we weren't paying attention itself, right, to the men, we were paying attention to the girls and saying, come on, you can do it, girl, you go, girl, you go, girl. You go, they go all the times over here. Then for some reason, there's a missing narrative around men. If you ask today, right, whether a girl at 18 has a vision of what it looks like to be a mother, she might have a clearer vision than an 18-year-old guy as to what it looks like to be a father. You'll find the woman to be a lot clearer. The guy would say it like that, lor. Right. I actually enjoyed the privilege of multiple friendships with students, ex-students. I would give an estimate of past 8 years or 10 years or so. Right? I have heard countless, right, number of stories of pregnancies, premarital sex, betrayal, all sorts of things, right, that can happen over here. And genuine pain that's tied to it. So much so to a level where they are just naturally saying, then why get attached in the first place? I keep hearing, right, I don't know, I just can't find any men. Men in Singapore are just like, you talk to them, they know how to be Starfleet commander for don't know what, you know, some spaceship that they're playing over there. They know how to do that. They know how to lead raids to actually kill that freaking red dragon. They know how to do that. And it's probably the best leadership role they had the whole. By doing so over here, when you really ask them, right, what is their request? What are you truly offering? What is your promise in life? What are your declarations? You actually can't really hear them. If you listen to the sentiment of women in Singapore today, many of them, right, have a heart for family. Many of them. Right? Yeah. But even right now in this room over here, I've got friends who are largely in the early 30s or things like that, and they cannot find perfectly wonderful women. Cannot find. Can't find good men. They all ask the same question, where are they? In actual proportion, right, there should be actually 0.2 more men than women around there. Maybe women must learn to slay dragons also. There's an absence of offers. Right? There's absence of them. Right there. If there's a request, there tends to be ignoring of them. I'm going through one marriage mediation right now. Right? One of the more challenging ones. And it was a case where they were married for 7 years, right? Have had sex 3 times. And basically the wife came and asked, what do I do? He just doesn't want to have sex. Right? Then I spoke to him, right? And we talked about it, and what he largely said was this. Okay, so every time he wants sex, she wants to have foreplay. It's 20 minutes left. No, 20 whole minutes of foreplay. What should we do? I'm going to just go masturbate. It's 3 minutes. No, and he really said that. 3 minutes faster than 3 minutes. Right? And then I talked to, and I said, so you're telling me that a woman who gave up her entire life for you, you can't spare 20 minutes? He said, what do you mean give up her life? I said, what do you mean? She gave up her life. She gave up her choices. She gave up her opportunities. She gave up things to marry you. Right? And you can't give 20 minutes. Right? And he goes, I never thought of it that way before. Are you freaking kidding me? Didn't cross his mind. And she requested, and she requested. And largely itself is just ignored. I began to look at basically divorce stats in Singapore. I was wondering how high are the divorce stats, right? And it's very strange over here because you know how we keep hearing about how we have actually increasing divorce rates and things like that. In actual stats, right, what's going on is this. In actual divorces, among 100% of marriages, we actually are only at 3%. So 97% of marriages will actually stay married, right? Only 3%, okay? But in yearly terms, right, every year we have 22,000 people getting married. Okay, every year we have 7,000 people getting divorced. Right, so 7,000 people of all the marriages adds up to 3%. Right, you have over there. But actual numbers, right, you're looking at annually, right, those numbers that always are very alarming, the 1/3 of all marriages, end up in divorce, is based on 22,000 versus 7,000. Right there. So divorce rates have been increasing. They're not startling, they're gradually increasing. But number of singles has increased startlingly high. People cannot find spouses. If people don't learn to request or to offer, whether you're a citizen or a spouse, whatever the case over there, if you don't learn to make declarations, if you don't learn to promise, there is no leadership in anything. There is no relationship in anything. Right? But behind all this, right, are a whole range of emotions. Fear, anxiety, loneliness, guilt, right? All range of emotions to tell me why is it I won't do this. It hit me more about what my rights were as a husband and father than what my responsibilities were. And the rights hit me a lot faster than the responsibilities did. And honestly, if you ask me when I got married, did I have a clear vision, right, of what it meant to be a good husband? I knew as much as movies told me. And a recent incident happened, right, just about 3 weeks ago that had me have even more deeper insight into what this really means, right, for my wife. But there's this funky gadget over here where you put your hand on and basically it will show you how many antioxidants you have in your body. So my wife put a hand on the machine, right, and put it on over here and went and it hit 16,000. Right, and she was very happy with herself. Right. And she says, oh, okay, now it's your turn. And she asked me to go and do it. Right? And she says, don't worry, my husband is much more healthier than me. Right? So I put my hand on over here, put my hand on to exit oxidants. I'm not kidding, right? It went zzz, then it stopped, and it went and I watched it, right, go from yellow to orange to deep orange to red, and it just kept going. And it finally stopped, right, at 0. I said, what do you mean 0? How do you have 0 antioxidants? Whatever they are, I'm quite sure I would like some, right? 0. And he said, do you eat vegetables? I said, no. I really don't. I didn't think they were very necessary. And the most poignant moment came when my wife turned to me and she put her hand on my heart and she said, I need you to be my husband. And my mind was like, and it took me about a few hours to translate this. Right? And what it really means is that if you love me, you will eat your vegetables. Because part of the responsibility in the vision of basically, right, a wonderful husband is someone who eats greens. And don't die. And don't die. And it's strange, though, because a lot of the times over here around the narrative of men, fitness is about how gorgeous you look. It's not about how long you live, right, for your family. And if you start changing basically the narrative, you realize that actually, right, that we have a lot more responsibilities than you think we really do. So whether or not we believe in nuclear families, alternative families, right, that's really a personal choice. Right? But the bottom line itself is that the quality of families, right, they have to remain. And it's something that I would choose not to disrespect. I'll give you some stats around basically, right, and this is a sample size of 2,600 of elderly in Marine Parade. Okay, very, very specific target group. Elderly in Marine Parade, 94% can live independently, 71% do not need health or social services. 94% have good relationships with their family. Okay? 78% suffer at least one chronic disease. Okay? 52% do not exercise, including vegetables probably. 15% fell in the last 12 months, 14% show signs of depression or dementia, and 10% live alone. Right there. So if we look at these particular stats right now, right, what can it tell us? Look at the discrepancies or the gaps between certain things, like I can live independently, right there. I have a good relationship with my family, 94%, right? But at the same time itself, right, I don't exercise, I have fallen, I show signs of depression. Which means over here, what does it really mean when it says I have good relationships with my family? And does it really translate into better results? Right? For all I know, this just means we're not killing each other. Right? And these are the things over here, right, that we're concerned about. Because I know that if I was filial to my mom, she would be exercising. This is a heat map, right? Coming from our Singapore conversations. It's readily available online over here, but basically what happened was that they were doing a heat map, right, of all the values that young people were holding. This first column over here is from the 20-year-olds, high 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So this is across age groups, right there. And the deeper the red, the more strong they feel about it. Okay? If it's blue, they really couldn't care less. Right? Really couldn't care less. So if you look at basically the heat map over here, right, basically upon sense of community, across age groups, right, even among the 40s is the deepest red over here. This is filial piety. And it's the one value system, right, that across the board people truly believe in. And it has lasted throughout generations. It has not become less deep or more deep over here. It's strong, right, throughout. You see how red filial piety is? And you see these other values that are like sort of like light, around humility, compassion, and things, right? What this shows to me, right, in my line of work, is that a younger person, or these people here, might not truly understand what filial piety is about. Yes. Because if you truly understood this, then humility will also be equally red. Yes. Equally. In fact, many of the other values are interrelated, will be equally strong. Because values don't exist in silos, no. They exist as an ecosystem. Right? Values, they exist as an ecosystem. They don't exist in silos. Right there. But we compartmentalize and say, as long as I'm a good, son, daughter, right, provide basically for my family, right, it doesn't mean I'm an asshole on the train. Humility comes to a place where we bring ourselves, right, to be connected and constituted of one another. Right? We are connected with one another this way. Compassion is the same thing. Filial piety is the same thing. They are all values that speak of interconnectedness. That's why you can't have one value without the others. Right there. So to me, this heat map is not good news. It's bad news. It shows me that this value is brittle. It is brittle. And given basically, right, the right circumstance, it will snap. And if I'm not wrong, the right circumstance will come roughly within 15 to 20 years' time, when the ratio is 3:1. So we begin to work, right, with young people today. They've got to understand the ecosystem of these particular values. They come together. When we talk about humility, we need to know what it is. When we talk about compassion, we need to know what it is. Right? When we talk about gratitude, we need to know what it is. Otherwise, it's just empty declarations. And it's an important request, right, that I guess we have for, all the audience in this particular room. Right? Whether you like it or not, you are part of life, you're part of death, and you're part of a family. Yeah. And it's the key thing itself that makes us do really, really well, right, as a country. So I'm closing with this, right, and I said itself, as far as this lecture is concerned, as I really began to work through it, it became a lecture about values. Right? There's no other real way to teach this effectively, right, or to share this effectively. But for what it's worth, thank you for tonight, and thank you for the time together. Right? I'm very grateful for this. Thank you.